Thank you for your testimony here today. I'm really proud of the efforts in the Department of Defense, our uniformed services, in integrating a force and leading this nation by example. Starting in the 1940s, executive orders that removed racial barriers to service, the work that has happened over the years in terms for inclusion of women in now every aspect of the military. It's hard to believe that it took an act of Congress just last year to finally get the Marine Corps to include women in basic training platoons. But sometimes it's come easy and sometimes it's been a little bit more of a challenge. But I think we can all take pride in the progress that we've made. Mr. Secretary, I really, really want to thank you for the historic decision that you made in naming an aircraft carrier after an enlisted soldier, recognizing the important contributions that enlisted men and women make to the force, and to naming that aircraft carrier after Cook First Class Doris Miller. So thank you very much for that. Having said what I've just said, we've got a problem. We've got a problem in both the civilian staffing and in uniform staffing in both the Navy and the Marines, and particularly in what I call the elite sectors, such as your fighter squadrons. Looking at your civilian staffing, you stated in your statement on page 17 regarding recruiting, curating, and retaining the best talent that you're leveraging leading private sector business practices. But in your human capital strategy for 2019 to 2030, there's only one mention of diversity in that strategy. Mr. Secretary, what are you doing to ensure that you are diversifying the civilian workforce at the Department of Navy?
Mr. Brown, thanks. First of all, thank you for the compliment on the Doris Miller. I really appreciate that and agree with you in terms of the historical significance of it. And I will tell you that as great a day as it was for the family of Doris Miller, it was an even greater day for the Navy. So just a wonderful moment for us as a country. We have challenges with this, or we've talked about this in your office before, about the challenges we have, particularly on the uniform side. As people progress through the service, we don't have a lot of diversity in the senior ranks. We have pretty good diversity in the civilian ranks. It's interesting that you noted that. I did not note that when I read through the human capital strategy. I'll have to look through that again. But the whole concept of our human capital strategy is to try to attract people from a variety of different areas, new types of people, new thinking, more diverse thinking, give them ways to come in and serve in the government, perhaps go back out. So I will look in specific.
Yeah, so let me just suggest then, if in your statement, you suggest that you're taking leading private sector business practices, I think in this regard, the private sector is well out in front of your strategy. So I would ask you to go back and look. Let's turn to the uniform service. Both the Marine Corps and the Navy, you have a serious problem in your fighter units, your fighter pilots. You have in the Navy 710 Navy fighter pilots, 17 or less than 3% are African American and not a single woman. You have 735 Marine Corps fighter pilots, less than 1% or five are African American, one woman. You've got claims of equal opportunity violations, inspector general reports. You have flag officers who are making inappropriate public comments, undermining the integrity of the EO process and the inspector general process. And I've sent a letter to the secretary to that regard. You have pilots, an African American pilot who has left the service, another whose record is still tarnished and will inhibit his promotion, a whistleblower who is still on the edge waiting an outcome of a report. And the concern is that the initial EO complaints substantiated that there were racial discrimination against these pilots. And then for some unexplained reason, it was reversed. And now you have 3 people sitting on pins and needles, wondering the fate of their future because you have these outstanding complaints. So you take the numbers alone, the lack of diversity and conclusion by race and gender, you've got these terrible cases in front of you, and you have a pilot shortage to boot, you've got a lot of work to do.